of these as props. How many of you in school, I can see by the sort of the age range, you may have heard reduce, recycle, reuse in grade school, right? Way back, right? The new, sort of in terms of what Cheryl was talking about, the younger kids are saying refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, which is along the lines of what Cheryl was saying. And to that end, sometimes recycling is kind of cool. Like these are alternatives to paper straws or plastic straws. These are bamboo and cardboard. And here's some metal straws. That would be reduced use, I would say, because there's packaging on this. There's refuse. It's a cotton bag that I got 37 years ago in Brooklyn. And I use it every week. There's reuse. This is recycled plastic in a reusable bag. Refuse. Porcelain. There's some rubber on there, which is plastic. Metal, stainless steel, which is really safe. And just before I introduce myself and start my thing, you mentioned wanting peanut butter in glass. That's smart, because plastic containers leach chemicals into fatty foods. Right. And there's a lot of oil in peanut butter, no matter what the type. So you're getting cleaner peanut butter. This bag is recycled plastic, water bottles, and so are these shoes. And they're soft. There's a rubber sole. They're soft and they're washable. And these are made out of PET bottles, polyethylene terephthalate, which is PET. I think it's one. Yeah. And so anyway, there are things you can do. Here's a reusable plastic bag made of plastic that I've had for about 10 years now. So it's possible to combine refusal, reduction, reuse. And the reason why my group, Environment and Human Health, is concerned about plastics and their refusal and reduction in your life is because we're becoming more and more concerned about exposures to the chemicals that are in plastic and that hitchhike on plastic. So I can see a lot of heads nodding. So I've got a really educated audience. So I'm gonna cover my talk. I've left a longer version of it with Michelle, and hopefully I'll tell you some stuff that you don't know yet.
What do you mean by refuse?
Refuse. If you're going to a store and you forget your reusable bag, and instead of taking, if there are any stores left that offer you even reusable plastic, just say no. Just carry the stuff out in your arms or put it back in your carriage and bring it to your car and put it in your car. And you just saved a bag, right?
Oh, okay.
The new state law taxing plastic bags has caused a lot of grocery stores and other stores to just stop using single-use plastic bags. That's going to take a big bite into the billion plastic bags a year that Connecticut was using. 1 billion bags, single-use plastic bags. So anytime you say no, it makes a difference, not only in your daily exposure, your individual use, but also in that flow of plastic into the recycling stream or into the incinerator or into the street litter and out the shore into the sound. So anything that you can do can help. But EHHI is particularly concerned about plastics because of human exposure to microplastics. In August, I'm going to read this because this is new. In August, scientists with the Department of the Interior and the U.S. Geological Survey, agencies of our federal government, issued a report titled, quote, "It's Raining Plastic." In the summer of 2017, they gathered samples of rainwater near Denver and Boulder and in Rocky Mountain National Park. More than 90% of those samples, rainwater samples, contained plastics, particles, in a variety of colors. They were blue, red, silver, purple, green, yellow, and other colors, and I saw the pictures of them. Also in August, a researcher in Pennsylvania reported she found microplastics in 93% of tap water that she tested, and plastic fragments in 93% of 11 brands of bottled water she tested. In the tap water, it was microplastics, fragments smaller than a millimeter. In the bottled water, it was PET, which is the hard plastic in the bottle. Where is it? I don't know if I have it. Hard plastic like this, and then the polypropylene, which is in the caps. And they were larger fragments than the microplastics. So it was in the tap water and the bottled water.
This is like community water or well?
It was municipal water.
Municipal water.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania. Also last month, but the bottled water was 11 different brands, they were global. Also last month, the World Health Organization issued a report which said that microplastics had been found in, quote, marine settings, waste and fresh water, food, the air and drinking water, both bottled and from the tap. So, and who's director, Department of Public Health, Environment and Social Determinants of Health is Dr. Maria Neira. She said this about the new report, quote, based on the limited information we have, microplastics in drinking water don't appear to pose a health risk at current levels, but she added, we urgently need to know more about the health impact of microplastics because they are everywhere, including in our drinking water. So what does this mean for us? So I'm going to talk just briefly about plastics because you're educated. How do plastics pollute? What is the human health impact of plastics and their pollution, and what can you do? What can Woodbridge do? So what are plastics? Plastics were invented in the early 20th century and came into wider use in the 1950s. Single-use plastics came more into use in the 1980s. They're now found everywhere in our daily lives and in much of our solid waste. So a lot of the categories that Cheryl pointed out contain plastic or are made from plastic. Plastics coat cans and receipt paper, and they bottle and cap water and many other products, including soft drinks and juices and teas and peanut butter. And when you go in the grocery store, and I notice this, you're finding more and more products bottled in plastic rather than glass. Electronics, cars, medical equipment, rubber tires, adhesives, water pipes, flooring, cabinets, cosmetics, detergents, and clothing are made from or may contain plastics. They're made from fossil fuels. Increasingly, plastics are made from using wet gases that are a byproduct of fracking. As such, they don't biodegrade or break down into organic material. Instead, it breaks down in sunlight and water. It's called photodegradation. Photodegradation. I can't say it. They photodegrade.
Degradation.
Photodegradation. Thank you. And that can take decades or centuries, and into smaller and smaller pieces of plastics called microplastics, and from there into something even smaller called nanoparticles. Very little is known about the health impact of microplastics or nanoparticles. That's what scientists are looking at right now. Plastic waste will also emit methane and ethylene, two gases that contribute to the global climate crisis. So how do they pollute? So they pollute when they break down into these smaller and smaller pieces. Large and small pieces of plastic last a long time, as I said, and that over time, plastic street litter and plastics that are thrown away in landfills find their way into streams and rivers, and from there into larger waterways in our oceans, where they attach themselves to sea plants, or they float in salt water until they're eaten by marine life, and that's how they travel into our food chain, up through those sources into our mouths and into our bellies. Microplastics have been found all over the world. They've been identified in human stool. I started by mentioning they've been found in rain in Colorado. They've also been found in that tap water in Pennsylvania and in the global samples of bottled water. They've also been found in snow and ice taken from Arctic samples. Microplastics. Plastic waste may also be incinerated, as it is in Connecticut. In some countries, trash, including plastics, is burned in open pits, including in many of the countries where our plastic waste is now ending up, rather than in China, particularly in Indonesia. Often waste is burned in open pits in those areas. So the plastics may end up in our food and in the air, water, and soil from toxic ash and from migrating plastic waste. Along with the drinking water samples I mentioned, they were found in 90% of samples of table salt and in substantial quantities of that Arctic ice and snow. Scientists hypothesize this contamination is due to airborne microplastic particles. So our ability to manage plastic waste is hampered by its longevity and by the sheer volume of the plastics we produce. Only 9% of the plastics are now or have ever been recycled. Our production and use of them are also increasing. We've made as much plastics in the past 13 years as we did in the previous half century, and that trend is projected to continue upward. So if you think of a curve, we manufacture plastics and then now we're manufacturing plastics. And the industry doesn't anticipate that that trend is going to decrease. As a measure of environmental impact, according to a 2016 report from the World Economic Forum and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, by 2050, plastic in the oceans will outweigh fish. So what's the human health impact of all of this plastic and its pollution? So the scientific study of our exposures, as I said, it's in early stages. The Center for International Environmental Law, of which I have given, there are a few copies of the executive summary of this report from January 2019, and Michelle also has a copy of it. They recently wrote that, quote, "Together the life cycle impacts of plastic paint a clear and troubling picture. Plastic threatens human health on a global scale." It's not just plastic waste that affects human health. From the extraction of the oil and gas that's used to make plastics to the end of life for these products, we may, to the end of its life, it may pose an impact on human health. We're exposed daily. We breathe it in, we eat it, we absorb it through our skin, and this includes packaging of food that leaches chemicals into the food that we eat. Especially those foods that are heated. If you take away anything from what I say today, please don't microwave your food in plastic anymore, especially food for children. If you do that one thing, this is a glass container. It's Pyrex. You can bake in it, you can freeze it. It's got a silicone lid. Take it off and microwave in that. Put another porcelain dish on top of it if you need to cover it so it doesn't spatter. So that will help you.
My microwave, I have a thing that you put on plates and stuff like that. It's a plastic thing. It's meant for preventing splatter when you're reheating stuff.
I would use, if you've got a saucer or anything but plastic.
How about wax paper?
Anything but plastic.
Wax paper.
Not anything but plastic. I mean, don't use metal in your microwave. Glass, porcelain, sometimes even a paper towel that has some chemicals on it, but it's far less likely to leach into the food, I think.
Someone said wax paper? Is wax paper?
Wax paper may contain actually PFAs.
I don't think so. There's no PFAS. There's no PFAS.
No? I don't know about, wax paper will melt in a microwave, won't it though?
I use it all. I don't use a microwave enough.
Yeah, I've never tried that. I mean,
just put it over the top.
Yeah, it's fine. It works fine.
So we're working to reduce the use of plastics because of this growing body of scientific research that's actually looking at microplastics and nanoparticles. Because those particles are so small, when they enter your body, it's possible for them to cross the blood-brain barrier. It's also possible for them to pass out of the organ and into our bloodstream because they're so tiny. We don't know yet what we do. We know there's one study that showed inflammation as a result of that exposure to those microplastics. So There are two groups of chemicals, phthalates and bisphenols of particular concern. These are used to respectively soften, right? So there are lots of phthalates in plastic film, or harden. There are bisphenols in hard plastic. And there are phthalates in soft plastic, including in detergents and cosmetics, shampoos, things like that, okay? Both of these have been found in human stool and urine samples from all over the globe. Bisphenols and phthalates, both at very low doses, can have health impacts, sometimes especially at low doses. These include endocrine disruption, diabetes, cancer, obesity, ADHD, and heart problems. As with other chemicals, they may present an increased risk to infants and children. So we know those chemicals do that. We know that they are in these plastics. We just haven't determined at what level and to what degree does our daily exposure contribute to those diseases in us. And that's what we're trying to connect right now. So EHHI is just recommending a reduction in your daily exposure to non-critical uses of plastic. Things that you don't need. I mean, you've got to drive your car, right? Your computer is covered in plastic, but you don't need a plastic straw. There are alternatives, or you can simply do without. And it's something that you can do on a daily basis to reduce your own exposure, one, and two, kind of reduce the flow of plastic into the waste stream and into that larger environmental contamination. So along with the chemicals that are in plastics, there are also chemicals that may hitchhike onto plastic. Plastic is a polymer in most cases, which means it's single units that are connected, kind of like those, I don't know if you ever used those little plastic toys when you were little. They were like little octagons that had a nipple on one end and a hole in the other, and you could snap them together. That's exactly what plastics looks like chemically. And then what happens is other chemicals in the environment, particularly in the marine environment, in the salt water, they're called persistent organic pollutants. Some of them are things like that cause cancer, like PCBs and dioxins and PAHs, and some are harmful metals as well. They attach in where the monomers link together. They ride on that plastic. Plastic is meant to absorb things. So they ride that plastic, and then what happens is when they're ingested or when they begin to photodegrade, as the plastic loosens, those harmful chemicals are desorbed, and then they're free for reabsorption in whatever's taken them up, like sea animals or algae or perhaps even human beings. So they're the chemicals in the plastic and then the chemicals that ride on the plastic that we're concerned about. Okay, so that's why that's why we're working on this. So what can you do? Because I'm seeing that look of dread on all your faces now. All right, so realistically, you can't eliminate your use of plastic altogether from your lives right now completely, but you can each make small daily choices. Number one, to use less plastic. Don't drink water from plastic bottles. There's plenty. Cheryl had a beautiful one. Good drinking water thing. Right, there's one. Right, metal cups with metal straws. This is like, I carry this everywhere. This can be hot or cold. It's pretty much watertight. There's a little leak in the seal. And that's metal. It can go in the fridge. I can pour hot tea in it and it lasts all day, okay? Use metal straws and porcelain or glass cups. Use glass food containers. As I said, never microwave food or beverage in plastic containers. Use reusable bags when you shop. And now and then bring your fruits and vegetables home without a produce bag or box. So in other words, these are acceptable and recyclable, right? That polyethylene things. A lot of times you'll see lettuce in this now. This is how I get my lettuce. It's boxed, and then you can recycle it, right? So, but now and again, buy a head of lettuce without a plastic bag. Just now and then, a bunch of carrots without a plastic bag. It'll help, okay? As a community, you can work together to pass laws to prohibit single-use plastics like the plastic bags that have been banned in some communities. Bags, cups, straws, stirrers, and expanded polystyrene food containers. To date, 19 communities in Connecticut have passed local ordinances banning single-use plastic bags. 10 of those local laws include a 10-cent fee for paper bags. At least 15 more communities are considering similar measures. In May, Westport's RTM unanimously passed an ordinance that bans single-use plastic and expanded polystyrene containers, straws, stirrers, and cups. The law goes into effect this November. Westport's single-use plastic bag ban went into effect in 2008. So they were the first one, and then 10 years later, Greenwich did it, and then 17 other communities did the same last year. Hamden and Stonington passed local laws this year banning both single-use plastic bags and plastic straws. There's more, but I'm just going to say this. At the state level, Connecticut has taken some action, in part kind of spurred by the local activity, but also because of the state legislators. They went back and forth all session, and they ended up passing, with the governor signing into a law, a statewide tax on single-use plastic bags. And that law does not prohibit local ordinances or bans on single-use plastic, nor does it prevent communities from passing a fee on paper bags. And as a result of that action, what you see is the grocery stores that were still giving out single-use plastic bags stopped. August 1. Today, September 3rd, Stop and Shop has initiated a fee on paper bags as well, and that started today. And I went into a lot of stores in the last month and asked, how did it go? How did people react? Is it working? Even Walmart. At Walmart, the Walmarts were mixed. It's fine. It was bumpy, just like it was in the local communities. It was bumpy. There were some citizens who didn't know and complained for the first couple of days, and everyone adjusted and started bringing in the reusable bags. And communities and retailers feel good about this. In the communities that I've helped out, they feel empowered. They feel like they're doing something for the environment, and they are. You see an immediate reduction in street litter with the passage of the bag ordinance, and it's really a marvelous kind of thing. In Greenwich, where they passed a ban on single-use plastic bags but did not pass a fee on paper, the retailers have now gone back to the town and asked the town to pass a fee on paper because they're giving away paper bags. The intention of a ban is to move people over from not from using plastic to paper, but from moving from plastic to reusable bags. And the way to do that I researched and found is to impose a fee of about 10 cents on paper bags. That's the most effective way to do it. It gets people away from single-use bags. So there was also an effort in the state legislature last year to expand the bottle recycling law to include juice, teas, and sports drinks bottles. It was raised and passed in the Connecticut House, and the Senate didn't act on the bill, so it died. And we're going to continue, EHHI is going to continue to strongly support this expansion of the bottle bill, and individual and community support of this effort can help. Writing to your legislators helps. It always helps. Writing to, as Cheryl, I was going to mention that, writing to the manufacturers, but more importantly to the retailers about packaging. Plastic packaging makes up 40% of our use of plastic in this country. Writing to them about those Theraform helps. Duracell has reduced its use of the plastic in their packaging for their batteries. You will start to see those on the shelves, and EHHI is reaching out directly to the retailers that carry, the big stores that carry those batteries. We're asking them to have Ever-Ready and Energizer do the same thing because it just makes sense. There's a little tiny film window now in the Duracell batteries. It's a third of the size of the Terraform, and it's easy to open. There's a picture of the battery on the outside, and it's recycled cardboard. It's great. It's really great. That happened, and Walmart's sustainability program and the other big companies' sustainability programs happened because they recognized that customers wanted that to happen, and that they were losing customers because they weren't doing the right thing. So anything that you can do to reduce your personal use, to encourage local or state or federal legislation that reduces the use of plastics, and as well as reaching out, a letter, a phone call. If any time one of your legislators asks you, or your sustainability committee asks you to write up to Hartford, do it, because they read those letters and it makes a difference. Okay. Maine just became the first state to ban expanded polystyrene containers in May. That the law bans bowls, plates, cups, trays, cartons, and other containers. And this is important because expanded polystyrene is a form of plastic. It uses styrene, which is a probable human carcinogen. Okay, so we shouldn't be eating out of it. And Maine just banned it. New York City's ban of those styrofoam containers went into effect on January 1 of this year. So New York stores and restaurants are no longer permitted to sell or possess those foam containers, including takeout clamshells, cups, plates, trays, and bowls. Packing peanuts are also banned in New York City. That's huge, okay? So this is all from people like you writing or saying, if that's in there, I'm not going to buy it, and they've responded. So we'll support any renewed efforts as a nonprofit in Connecticut for similar measures at the state or local level, and everything you can do, please, to reduce your personal exposure, to protect your kids, and to create a positive model to your own neighbors and then to your neighboring communities helps. And this isn't like a punishment. That's the last thing I want to. This actually makes people feel good. And I was at a round table up in Mystic last week. Senator Murphy, who's proposing he's a co-sponsor of federal legislation on marine pollution. Heard from about 70 activists about what's working in the state and what's not, and what they recommend for that legislation. So they're listening. They're watching at the federal level. The EU is looking at banning single-use plastics of certain forms. Canada is as well. Shanghai, China is as well. So, you know, what you're doing here may seem isolated and kind of wonky, right after Labor Day, but it's really having a huge impact, which is why EHHI has sent me out to keep talking to people. And Chris Murphy was very interested in how the local ordinances that push had an impact at the state level, and how he could harness that kind of energy. And I said at the table that it was real, that people were really concerned, that they really wanted to know how to limit their own use and what they could do to stop this flow of pollution that's affecting marine and land life and us as well, okay? So you guys are important, and you need to know that. That's it. That's my anti-corporate. I'm glad to take any questions you have any.
Yeah. Unless you're all tired out and you're like, oh, I gotta get rid of
That was a
all my
lot.
plastic.
So if I'm going to buy milk at the grocery store, is it better if I buy it in a plastic versus cardboard or a paper container? Is one more valuable when it goes into the recycling bin?
So
When it
plastic,
goes in the recycling bin, I don't think it matters, but I don't know the health benefit. I don't know.
I would say from health impact, if you can afford to buy it in a glass bottle, at Whole Foods, there's a glass bottle. I've done it. It costs $2. It's a deposit. You buy the organic local milk in the glass bottle. It's got a plastic container that is not recyclable. You drink the milk, and then when you're done with it, you bring the bottle back to Whole Foods and you get $2 back. If you can't do that, the cartons, I think cartons are they are paper coated with plastic. But
It's not bad.
just the amount of plastic on it is probably a less harmful exposure. The bottles are most typically made of polyethylene, and there are a few additives in the polyethylene, or the PET. There are fewer additives than another form of plastics, but because it is a fossil fuel product, we do know that the chemicals that are in that plastic do leach out into the food that it contains, especially fatty foods like milk, meat, and other dairy products. So if you can avoid that, and also too, if you feed children, I mean, there is some yogurt now that comes in glass containers, both, I think Dannon makes a version of it, and there's Nuri or something like that. Whenever you buy fatty foods in plastic containers, try and buy it in a bigger container and then transfer it into a smaller Pyrex container, something that's not really breakable for their lunches. Or there's a lot of metal stuff coming out for children's food now, just because of the surface area, right? In a larger container, the food in the container, less of the surface of it is exposed directly to the plastic, whereas in the smaller individual containers, right, there's going to be more of the food that's exposed. And we're concerned about the fatty foods, so meat, cheeses, and dairy, anytime you can avoid plastic. I know that it's hard because most of the cheese is wrapped in plastic that we buy in our grocery stores, unless you go to a farmer's market.
It is all about incremental steps, by the way.
That
I know
is.
it's heavy. This is the 4th time I've heard Trish, and every time I'm like, oh, I forgot I could do that.
But you said you make yogurt.
I do.
Right. Yeah, it's what I'm talking about is,
But I
It's the
buy my
science
milk
side.
in a carton.
I know, it's a big carton.
which is recyclable.
There's a new type of container, reused container made out of silicone. You
Yes.
heard about that? I read about it and said you can
Silicone
freeze
is-
it, you can microwave it, you can do is.
I still wouldn't microwave in it. I mean, I know silicone is considered to be more inert than plastic is, but that's just the industry's, what happens with the industry is this. There's bisphenol, right, BPA. A scientist at Tufts goes, I'm gonna look at this, and she finds out it's an endocrine disruptor. So the industry says, okay, we're gonna make BPA-free stuff, and what they do is they make 30 different versions of bisphenol. BPF, BPAS, BPAZ, BPAX, and they use those other versions of bisphenols, which have the same characteristics as BPA. So then the scientists go, we can only assume while we create more studies that because it has the same characteristics chemically as BPA, it probably has the same health impact. But it allows the industry to say, oh, this is safe, it's BPA free, right? So that's what the industry does. So if the industry says silicone is inert and safe to microwave, but the independent scientists haven't said that, then you're not sure, right? And I see she's grabbed a can. Most cans are coated with plastic in the United States. And many of them now will say, especially the organic ones, BPA free. But that just means they're using probably BPF is the version.
You coat it on the inside or the outside?
Inside. It's to make it less, it's to make it waterproof, it's to make it
So we don't
rust
need to change
resistant.
Trish is very uplifting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a drag, right?
It is.
But is that less exposure than buying beans in a plastic bottle? Probably.
Probably my cynicism.
Right. What would be perfect is that old jar of B&M beans, right?
Yeah.
That glass jar.
Or the
I mean,
dry-
I've
never seen, I don't
Dry
know.
beans.
Yeah,
They
dry
make their own
beans.
fresh.
I'm looking now, I spend half my time in the grocery store looking for glass bottles of Honest tea. because now all of the teas are coming in plastic, and they even say across the top, plastic bottle, like it's a great thing.
What about
Which makes sense for the industry, they're lighter, they don't break, there's less breakage, there's less, I can't remember what you call it.
That's true about the olive oils too. Is
Yeah,
that-
the olive
there's
oils.
ju-
That's
the
true.
olive oils
And
are now
all
coming
oils
in
again are
plastic.
fatty, we're concerned
So
about
that,
those.
yeah, I can't find
And
any.
mayonnaise?
Gotta go into metal.
Mayonnaise are
Yeah,
only,
mayonnaise.
mayonnaise are only glass bottles.
There's industry coming out around all of this. There's something called loop, which I have to look at. Not only is, there's an industry that now that the supermarkets are using to recycle their plastic film, and it is being remade into other things. So when you bring your film or your bags into any of the grocery stores, go into where the bottle redemption center is, you'll see big messy bins full of probably contaminated, but it's
Don't
still.
go, yeah, go to the other bin that's not in the.
Yeah, go to the other bin, put your plastic bags and your film in there, and they get recycled into things like boardwalk and picnic tables and flooring and things like that. But that doesn't mean that they don't photodegrade into microplastics. That's the problem. The problem with plastics is it's not like food. It doesn't break down into soil or carbon. It breaks down into microplastics, and then it's nanoparticles, and maybe in 300 or 1,000 or 5,000 years, we don't know yet because plastics are so new, it will then break down into ethylene and methane, but until then, we're eating and drinking plastics, okay?
Right, one more question.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment about the trucks. So my issue with recycling plastic film into composite lumber
Yes,
is the lumber is then plastic. Your contractor is putting on a deck and they're sawing that lumber on your front yard and those microplastics are in your soil.
yes,
So I would recommend that if you are a fan of composite lumber, that you ask your contractor to do it either over a tarp or on concrete where it can be swept up and taken away rather than those microplastics on your. I'm not a fan of composite lumber at all. But if you do use it, consider what happens to the sawdust. It's not dust as in wood fiber, it is plastic fibers.
and again, it does photodegrade over time. You can see it, and I see it in the boardwalk on Campo Beach. And when it photodegrades, it's just breaking down. It's what happens, recycled rubber tires are plastic as well. And those break down into smaller particles that are then, I mean, there are different exposures. You can eat them, you can inhale them. There's dermal exposure as well to the chemicals that are in plastics. And the phthalates and the bisphenols at very low doses cause those health effects. So, yeah, it's just, that's why right now our message is try and reduce your use, your non-critical use of plastics. You know, if a baby is born prematurely, there's a lot of plastics involved in that baby's care and in any medical procedure as well, you know. And that's a critical use of plastic, and thank goodness that tubing exists, you know. It's in PVC pipes. All of our water pipes are made of plastic now. So that's it. I mean, so do what you can do, and what you can do is actually important. And so I hope that offsets the grossness of what I told you.
Well, I guess we got a few more questions.
Not a question, just to kind of sort of piggybacking on some of what you were saying. So in terms of like consumer feedback, every time I go to a hotel and they have those little teeny toiletries and whatever, I always fill out a comment card saying, get rid of them, get rid of them. Put if you need to put anything, I'm a grown up, I can bring my own shampoo, but if you don't, then Marriott Bonvoy right now is changing everything, well, most all of their rooms over to larger dispensers,
Yeah.
and then they refill those and stuff.
That was
They're
just
getting rid of
announced, right, a month ago?
They're getting rid of the little ones, so I give them both positive and negative feedback, like I do it at Costco every time I go. I'm like, stop using all the plastic, but if you're going to use them, give us an opportunity to bring it back. There's no place to bring it back there.
That's actually a
And
great
so
example
I
of
just feel like
refuse.
telling them, you're doing a good job, or or you're gonna lose me as a customer if you don't.
Right,
One way or another, it has to have an impact if we all do it.
Zero wasters often talk about the idea of refuse is actually refusing free stuff. That often when I saw this, I was like,
Right.
get it. And they use that as an example, that we take it, it's free. Yay, I can bring it home and use it.
Right.
But there is a negative to that on many different levels. One, it's better in bulk, and then if you bring it home, it actually becomes trash after you use it, because you can't put it in the recycling bin, it's too small.
Right, they're too little, yeah.
Is that
Great
why the
example.
pill bottles are not acceptable?
Yep. Do you remember when I showed you the grate? It falls through and it goes into glass, and that's why pill bottles are not
Oh,
acceptable.
There is a place that can
Preserve.
There is?
so.
Yeah,
Police
it's,
department.
So, Industry 25?
So there's a difference between an empty container and a full container. So, this is big, and so this won't fall through, and this is acceptable, this is
Okay.
not, it falls through. However, in Connecticut, all the police departments will take leftover pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, but what about the empty bottles?
No, the bottle, there's a place actually, I can't remember the name of it, I'll look it up if anyone wants to know, I'll tell you later. I think it's like Ministry 25 or something like that, and they actually, if you take the labels off, it has to be like clean and dry, whatever, and you put it ironically in a Ziploc bag, send it to you, send it to them. They then use it for third world countries who don't have places to keep their medication, and they don't have dry,
I like
you
that
know,
reuse, but
it's a reuse because, you know, I take a
there's
ton of
certain
medication.
things I don't know if you should reuse, because plastic is an absorbent. But
They
Your
have a
call.
program, I don't know, I mean, they do have a program where you can, if you can get the labels off well enough and send it to them.
well, if anybody wants more information. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
You're flagging us down. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much, you guys are a great audience.
Thank you.
There are some things in the back.